our speaker is Annika McGivern, who is from BC. She is a sport and exercise psychology coach. She has a bachelor's in psychology from UVic and a master's in sport and exercise psychology from the University of Ulster. So that is pretty darn impressive. But even more impressive is she is an Equestrian Canada competition coach. And so she not only knows about exercise, she knows about the mental game, and she knows about equestrians and how it affects equestrians in general. So her mission is to help people reach their goals and train to compete with confidence and optimize your ability to use your mind for you and not against you. So without further ado, I'm going to send it over to Annika. Again, everyone, if you can remain muted, that would be awesome. And if you have any questions, put them in the chat. And our wonderful technical committee will try and react appropriately and put your questions through. So, okay, Annika, take it away, please.
Wendy, thanks so much. And welcome everyone. It's really lovely to be here with all of you. I'm zooming in from Ireland today, which is where I'm living at the moment. I've been here for the last 3 years. So it's so lovely to connect with some Canadians and hang out with all of you. Yeah, just really delighted. So I'm going to just dive right in. Thanks so much, Wendy, for the lovely introduction. And really, we're here today to talk about creating safe spaces. And this is really the first thing that comes to mind for me. I'll just maybe pause here and check. Wendy, can you see those slides okay?
I can, yep.
Perfect. Always worth checking. Sometimes they don't go up. So we're really here, or what I really want to bring to you today is a conversation around how we can create safe spaces in our sport. Because safety and a safe space is essential for us as individuals, as athletes, to grow, to perform to our best, to reach the goals and big, exciting things that we're moving towards. And of course, bullying, unfortunately, is something that is common and ultimately detracts from the safety that we all experience, damages the quality of the spaces that we're all working in and growing in and performing in, and can damage a lot of people along the way. And so the goal today is to open up a conversation around this. And I have a fun little tool called Mentimeter, which I'll be asking you all to participate in throughout. It's completely anonymous, and I'll explain a little bit more when we get there. It's just a way for you all to answer some questions in a way that's anonymous, and your answers will just pop up on the screen as you pop them in. So living with fear stops us from taking risks. And if you don't go out on the branch, you're never going to get the best fruit. So when we're talking about bullying, really what we're talking about is, or what we're looking to understand is the dynamics of fear, because bullying is all about fear. It triggers fear. It often comes from a place of fear. And it is, in many ways, a form of trying to control someone or control the environment using fear as our resource or a method of control. And so bullying is all about fear. And when we have an environment that permits bullying or that has a lot of bullying in it, we have an environment with a lot of fear in it. And that ripples out and affects all sorts of things in that environment. And ultimately, it holds us back. It keeps us from taking the risks and pushing ourselves in the way that we need to grow and reach our full potential, both as individuals and as groups and teams. So our goal today is to see if we can understand a little bit more about what exactly bullying is and where it comes from. We're going to look at what we can do to take ownership over our own emotional experience, over our own sense of self-worth, and essentially sort of put our own oxygen mask on so that we're better prepared to help others. And we're going to look at different ways we can take action around bullying. And then we're going to look at about what we can do to really establish a strong foundation of community and culture that doesn't allow room for bullying, that makes it really clear that bullying is not a part of who we are and what we do, and therefore really establishes safety and sets the tone for not just today, but moving forward as well. So as we said, what we need to do first to understand bullying is understand fear. So the picture we have in front of us is of a small part of the brain called the amygdala, the little cranberry shaped pink part in the middle there. The amygdala is the part of the brain that flips the switch on what we call our fight or flight response. I'm sure many of you or all of you have heard of this before. It is the brain's system and how it responds to threat. So when the brain perceives that we are being threatened in some way, the amygdala, this little cranberry shaped thing, flips the switch and we go into fight or flight response. And essentially our brain floods us with the chemicals, the hormones that we need to help us either fight our way out of that threatening situation or run and escape that threatening situation. So this system evolved a long time ago in response to sort of the early human reality where we were facing a lot of life-threatening dangers on the day-to-day basis, right? Nowadays, we don't experience as many life-threatening dangers, happily. However, our experience of threat is still very high. It's just a little bit more nuanced and more complex. So interestingly, though, our brain interprets the threats of today. So the threat of somebody not approving of us, the threat of someone not liking us, the threat of embarrassing ourselves in front of others, of making a mistake, the threat of not reaching our goals. It interprets all of those threats in much the same way that it interprets a life-threatening event. So what I often kind of imagine is that our brain doesn't really know the difference between walking around the corner on a trail and coming face to face with a grizzly bear, or being in a situation where we feel like we're going to embarrass ourselves beyond any recovery. So although those are two very different situations in real life, we often have very, very similar, if not exactly identical, physical and mental responses to those situations. And what happens is that when fear is ruling our brain, it cuts us off from the more advanced sections of our brain that allow us to think calmly and reasonably and come up with solutions. So when we're being ruled by fear, when fear is governing us or hijacking us in any given moment, we really, really struggle to think clearly, to think reasonably, to see sort of a full range of perspectives around what's actually happening to us. Our brain just goes into full focus on survival and defending ourselves at all costs. So it's important to recognize that that's the system and the sort of dynamic that's going on in the background when we experience bullying, because bullying triggers that fear response and that survival response. It's also an experience we can have just from witnessing bullying. And we'll go into a little bit more into that in a little bit. So I want to invite everyone now to have a look at this emotion wheel. There's a lot of emotions here. Have a look at all of them and see if you can just do a quick tally in your head. How many emotions do you think you've experienced in the last 24 hours off of this wheel? And feel free to throw that number in the chat if you can come up with one. What do you think? How many emotions have you experienced in the last 24 hours? Anyone willing to share a guess? All the ones in the center? Okay, yeah. So the kind of core ones there, absolutely. About 20, yeah. Interesting, isn't it, right? Anyone else? Anyone else got higher than 20, lower than 20? 25? Yeah. So that's a lot of emotions, isn't it? And we often don't, you probably weren't necessarily aware in the moment that you were experiencing such a broad range of emotions, and yet we do experience them. So I want to draw your attention now to the center cog for fear, right? And so fear is kind of that base emotion, but look how many emotions come out of that fear. Mortified, anxious, worried, inadequate, inferior, hysterical, panic, helpless, terror, insecure. There's a huge range, there's a huge amount of nuance in the emotions that we experience that are all related to fear or come from fear. And then I want to draw your attention to the sadness cog. And again, just really look at what radiates out from sadness. And the reason I ask you to do that is that fear and sadness are kind of the two core emotions that are most related to bullying. But I think we oversimplify when we just say it's just about fear, it's just about sadness. Human emotion is so much more nuanced than we generally recognize. And so when we are looking at the consequences of bullying, we have to see that it can result in a huge variety of emotions. So I want to open up the question now, what does bullying actually look like to you? And the reason I add on the to you part is that all of us have different beliefs and assumptions and perceptions around what it means to be bullied or what it means to bully someone. So I'd like to collect from all of you some ideas around what does this actually look like so that we can kind of hold them up and have a look at them. So to do that, I'm going to invite you to use our Menti tool, which is a really fun tool, the one that I described, and we'll be answering this question. So to do that, I'm just going to pull down my slides and pull up our Menti screen. And all I need everyone to do is either follow the link that I'm about to pop in the chat here, and that link will bring you directly to a place where you can answer this question. Or if you'd rather do it on your phone, so you're not messing around with multiple screens, you can go to the website at the top here, www.menti.com, and use the code 6056445, and that code will bring you in to the same Menti. And so I'd love for everyone to contribute at least one idea here, and thinking about what, and also really trying to make this specific to your sport or equestrian sport in general. What might be some examples of what it would mean to be bullied or to bully in that context? And please let me know if you're having any trouble accessing the Menti or if any of that isn't making sense, and I'll be able to help. Yeah, when someone calls me a name, yeah, so telling you that you're stupid and or incompetent. And I'll add to that too that when you call someone that, it goes so much more than just a name. You're saying this is who you are. You're defined by this. You are someone who is stupid. And that can be really damaging. Negative reference to horse, tack, outfit. Okay, yeah, so potentially playing on some negative comparisons there. Making you feel maybe less than or not like you're not measuring up. Rumors and lies, yeah, absolutely. Insults or embarrassing comments, yeah, absolutely. I think these all really resonate with me. When I mocked or nitpicked on everything. Okay, yeah, so when someone's really, really kind of being extremely critical. And it's great that you mentioned mocked there, right? Because sometimes bullying hides under the mask of humor. And we have to it takes, a bit of awareness to be able to separate that out, and a bit of courage to be able to say, well, I know, that's actually not funny, or whether or not you meant it to be funny, it's actually, it's having a really negative consequence. Okay. So thanks everyone for sharing these examples. And if you just keep your Menti open somewhere, we will be coming back to it with a few other questions throughout the hour. So if you can, don't shut it down. I'm just going to come back to our slides here for a moment. So like I said, we all have different perceptions around what bullying looks like. So it's really important that we are always checking in with our own assumptions here. We may not recognize a behavior as a bullying behavior because it just doesn't fit within the kind of schema or the network of what we assume is bullying or what we see as bullying. And so it's really important that if someone comes to us with an experience of being bullied, that we don't dismiss if it doesn't just sort of fit into our already established idea of what bullying looks like. One of the biggest tools and resources we can bring to the table is being open-minded and being genuinely curious about understanding the other person's experience. And that helps us to really see around our own assumptions and biases and recognize that there's a huge variety of ways that actually people can be bullied or experience bullying. So I'm just going to share a bunch of them now on the screen just to show again that there's such a diversity here. So mean text, pranking someone's phone, hacking into someone's network profile, being rude or mean to someone online, spreading rumors or secrets online or in person, pretending to be somebody else, spreading hurtful messages, harassing or threatening someone through mean messages, again, all online sources here, coercing people into doing things that they don't want to do, so through applying a lot of pressure, dismissing someone's efforts, so sort of devalidating their efforts or devalidating what feels important to them, embarrassing people, excluding others, intimidating, lying, minimizing concerns. So when someone comes to you with, this is really bothering me, or I'm really upset about this, basically saying, oh no, that's not important, or that's not really something that we need to worry about, or that's, you're overreacting, you're too sensitive, threatening others, unfair criticism, taking pictures of people without their permission, sharing those photos, and spreading rumors. So again, this is only probably a very small cross section of all the different types of bullying behaviors that there are, but there's such a huge diversity. And so really, I hope the take home from this is that we have to stay open-minded. We have to listen to people's experience and take them at face value. If they feel that they're experiencing bullying, then it's worth exploring and it's worth listening to their experience and trying to get to the bottom of it. So there's 3 really important truths about bullying to help us sort of understand this a little bit better. So number 1 is that it's impossible to actually know for sure how someone is feeling or how we've made someone feel. And this is a really interesting because we tend to, and this is in general, all people, we tend to assume that we're better at reading other people's emotions and reactions than we actually are. And so we might feel quite confident that person totally thought what I said was funny and have no notion that their feelings were hurt. We're actually people are very, very good at concealing their hurt feelings, at concealing how things actually made them feel. And so it's really important, again, that we're not making assumptions that we understand the impact of our behavior on others. We have to stay open-minded and curious and be willing to ask other people with genuine interest and curiosity about their experience and how things make them feel in order to get a true and accurate understanding of their experience. So truth number 2 is that bullying holds everybody back from reaching their goals and becoming the best athlete they can be. And when I mean everyone, I mean not just the people who are actually being targeted or victimized by the bullying. So research shows that bullying actually has this ripple effect, and even people who witness bullying will experience many of the same negative effects as those who are actually being targeted. So what actually happens? What are the feelings that we experience when we're being bullied? So remember, right, that the bullying is triggering that fear response in our brain. And so what we get is a mixture of a mental experience and a physical experience. So the mental experience is often self-critical thoughts, anxiety, stress, depression, sometimes are experiences of depression. And then the physical side of that is that they're likely to have physical symptoms of that stress. So we may experience headaches. We may struggle to sleep. We may have an sort of accelerated heart rate or feel tense or jittery or stressed in our body. And so that impact, as I said, does not just impact those of the actual victim of the bullying. It ripples out and impacts even those who might witness the bullying. And the reason that is even if you're not being directly bullied, but you're just witnessing it, or you're just a bystander, it still makes you feel unsafe. It still sends a message to you that you're in an environment that is unsafe, and there's a feeling of, I could be next, or I need to be extra careful I need to walk on eggshells around this person because I don't know if they're going to turn on me next. There's no safety and security in the environment. And as I said at the beginning, safety and security is sort of a foundational platform that we really need in our sport cultures in order to enable and empower athletes to reach for goals, to work hard, to have the confidence to go for those big, scary, and sometimes overwhelming goals that they set for themselves. And without that foundation of a secure environment to do that from, that becomes incredibly difficult. And then truth number 3 is that it's useful to understand where bullying really comes from. So number 1, bullies tend to bully often because they have experienced bullying themselves. And so because they've been bullied themselves, that sort of shapes their experience, and often leaves them with slightly a lower ability to empathize with others, because through their own experience of being bullied, they've spent so much time in that part of their brain that's just trying to defend them and trying to keep them safe, that they haven't spent much time practicing and imagining what it's like to be in someone else's shoes. We can only really get to that higher level of thinking when we feel safe and secure in ourselves. And so a bully is often someone who has experienced bullying, and therefore is not great at judging with empathy how their actions are impacting others. Bullying also often comes from seeking social attention out of a real experience of loneliness. And so sometimes when we're lonely and we don't have a sense of how to get attention or how to feel seen, we will bully as a form of trying to bring attention our way, even if that is negative attention. It often comes also from frustration and envy, sort of a desire to nearly sort of even the playing field or even the score. So if the bully perceives that somebody is, if they feel that someone is more talented than them, they feel that that person is having more success than them, maybe has a better horse or, better equipment, it's possible that the bullying will come from a desire to try to level that playing field a little bit and make things seem more fair or more even. And then most commonly, I think out of everything, bullying tends to come from a place of shame. So for whatever reason, bullies experience a huge amount of shame themselves around who they are, maybe their life circumstances, what's going on for them. And shame is an emotion that causes the person who's feeling the shame a huge amount of emotional pain. And there's some fascinating research on this now that shows that people who are experiencing really high levels of pain have an extremely acute internal experience of pain, very similar to physical pain. And in fact, all the same areas of our brain are firing when we experience the emotional pain from shame, as when we experience physical pain from, say, breaking a leg or falling. So that acute pain that person is in from that shame, again, causes them to go into sort of an extreme defensive mode, makes it very hard for them to empathize, and often results in this kind of lashing out behavior where they're, again, trying to just sort of even the score or trying to alleviate that pain in some way, although that it is often, and of course, very ineffective. So understanding a little bit about where bullying comes from, I think, really demonstrates, again, the importance of building safe spaces within our sport. because those safe spaces are not just going to help the victims of bullies, they're also going to help people who are bullies or who potentially could become bullies. Because the safer the space and the clearer the culture is and the environment is around creating safety and all of the values that go into establishing that, the less likely we're going to have someone actually turn to bullying as a way of trying to resolve their own internal pain. So let's go back to our Menti here, and I'm just going to invite everyone to do a little brainstorm around this question. So what actually creates the perfect environment then for bullying, whether that's in person or online? So given everything we've talked about here, we know a little bit more about where bullying comes from. We know that fear is a big part of it. What do we think? What might needs to be happening in our environment, or what needs to be happening in the environment to create that perfect situation? So I'm just going to change over our Menti here. And so if you go back to your Menti screen, you should be able to see the new question there and the opportunity to answer that new question. So I'd love to hear from you all to see what do you think about that? Perfect. So I think this answer here, I think, is speaking to what we would need to have a bullying-free environment, which is perfect as well. So although it's sort of the reverse of the actual question there, it's perfectly fine to answer in that way as well. So you could answer what's there to allow, what's in the environment that supports bullying, that allows bullying to happen, or you could come at it from the other direction like this person has and say, right, what do we need in the environment to prevent bullying? And as we see here, yeah, open communication, free of judgment. Okay, so here we have a challenging project. Interesting. Okay. Goal setting in a way that is achievable. Great. Okay, what else? I'd love to hear more about if you're able to enter again, sometimes it lets you enter more than once, whoever put in the challenging project. I'd love to hear more about that and what that sort of means to you, or maybe pop it in the chat if you don't mind. Just pause here for a moment to see if anyone else wants to contribute to the Menti, if anyone else wants to come over. A lack of positive resources. Yeah, interesting. So yeah, so resources that support people to feel safe, to maybe have the awareness around what those bullying behaviors look like. Absolutely. A high stress project where we do not know what is going to happen. Okay, yeah, thanks for the clarity there. Yeah, absolutely. So anything where we have a lot of stress, 100% is going to put us more in that fight or flight response. Stress tends to trigger that fight or flight response. And so everyone's going to feel less safe and is going to be less in control of their sort of reasonable, rational thinking. So yeah, absolutely. Supporting those who feel a lack of security. Yeah, so I think that's a fabulous one. From the other perspective then, what can we do in our environments to support those? When there's a secluded place where they're alone with a few people and no one to oppose. Yeah, I think that's a really good one to point out, right? That the actual physical environment in terms of like how things are set up and where people can be in bigger or larger groups where they're being witnessed and sort of held accountable for their actions is really interesting to consider as well. Absolutely. Okay, if there's any other thoughts there, go ahead and keep adding to that Menti. I'm going to come back to this. Oh, yeah, open door policy. Brilliant. Yeah. Okay, so we'll just come back here. Sorry, 2 moments here. Seem to have lost my slides. I'll just be 3 seconds. So here we go. Okay, sorry about that, everyone. And we are back. Okay, so I want to just add a few other possibilities here, things that might factor into this environment, right? So in terms of, especially when we're dealing with youth athletes, if there's a constant situation where there's not a real presence of coaches or presence of adults, then sometimes, or a presence of older athletes who are there to kind of be role models, then that can sometimes foster an environment where bullying can flourish. Also, we want to think about sort of what's the norm in our culture. Is it considered normal to kind of shout out at people, poke fun at, use humor as a way of kind of riling people up? Sometimes if that's normal in our culture, that can also kind of open doors to bullying. Similarly, it's kind of an overuse of sarcasm, because again, that can be very easily misconstrued. We want to make sure that that there's sort of a real clear presence of adults or role models or mentors within the community leading by example. So if there's an absence of that, if no one's really setting the example and willing to take that leadership role, again, we can end up with a bit of a bullying environment. Also, one thing that's interesting to note is if we have a culture of nobody likes a tattletale, where we kind of push down this idea of sharing your experience or letting people know or speaking to a coach or an adult if something goes wrong, then that makes it really hard for people to come out and speak about their experience. So we want to think about how can we actually encourage an environment of, we do always talk about how we feel and that's okay. And it's important to share how somebody impacted you instead of the opposite. If there's a lack too of sort of a mentor system, so we have new people coming in and there's no structure in place to help them with some kind of mentorship or support or buddy system to help them fit in and join in and sort of find their way, that can also sometimes create an environment for bullying or open the door to that. Additionally, if there's no clear procedures on how to actually handle bullying or report incidents of bullying, then this can cause problems as well, right? So even if somebody wants to come forward, sometimes if there's a lack of understanding about how to do that or how to do that in a way that doesn't make the situation worse, that can be really challenging. And then the last one is when we have, as the coaches or the leaders in the environment, aren't confident enough to really challenge difficult situations, to step up and say, no, that's not acceptable, or this is how we can handle this better. And so for all of us who are coaches and leaders, we want to think about what can we be doing ourselves to really build confidence around the communication skills and the leadership skills that allow us to step up in those moments and take action or speak out. And for some of the athletes here today, you could be thinking about what would it mean to sort of take on a bit of a leadership role as an athlete within my community, to be someone who what do I need to do to build confidence around my communication and to be able to maybe speak up in those situations or be a role model. So lots of different things to consider there. So at the heart of all this, when we're talking about the environment and the factors that shape our environment, everything that goes into it, what I'd really want to do is bring this back to values. So values are a core part of any high performance culture and any sort of culture that supports strong well-being for its members. So values are things of importance that we decide on as individuals or as a group. And those things of importance then shape our decisions, they inform our actions, they become a huge driving force for how we choose to behave and how we choose to operate in the world and within our sport. So we have lots of different examples of values up here on the screen. And I'm actually going to share now an even longer list. And I want to invite everyone to just scan through this list and notice which one of these jump out to you on a personal level. So which one of these resonate with you? And there could be 2, 5, 10, or more that make you think, yeah, actually, that's something that's really important to me about how I show up in my life, about how I treat other people, and about how other people treat me. as you're scanning through here, I'll just, note that there's a lot of words on this list, but it's certainly not an exhaustive list of values. So if another word has come into your mind just now thinking about what's important to you and you don't see it on that list, then that doesn't mean shouldn't be on your list or it's not a value. It just means it hasn't made it onto this one. So I'd invite everyone to actually jot down the values that jump out to them, or any other ones that come to mind. Having an awareness of our own personal values is the first essential step to being able to contribute to setting cultural values or group values that then help us intentionally shape the environment and kind of form a framework for shaping an environment that just has no room for bullying, and that is all about safety and respect and mutual growth and success. If anyone feels happy enough to share one or two of the values that jump out there for you personally, I'd love to hear that in the chat or see that in the chat. It's always lovely to see what values are resonating with people. All of us have values, whether or not we're specifically aware of them. And what's really interesting is that our values tend to sit sort of under the surface of our consciousness. And they're always there, whether we're aware of them or not, they're always there driving our behavior. And so by taking a moment to think about them and bring them up into our conscious awareness, what that does is it enables us to actually start to use them on purpose as a way to direct our behavior and our choices in a way that feels really aligned with sort of like the best version of ourselves and who we really want to be, both as individuals and as people within our sport. Thanks for sharing, Carolyn. Yeah, lovely. Honorable courtesy, self-esteem, awareness, goal setting, and achievement and respect. Fabulous. Those are lovely. Openness, freedom, positivity, family, courage, confidence, and accountability. Oh, fabulous. These are really, really great. Balance, ethical, and love. Love it. Just to share too, my top ones, I've done a lot of thinking around this, as you may imagine. And my top ones are honesty, determination, connection, and adventure. Those are all things that it's not, again, not an exhaustive list for me, but the ones that I've kind of really whittled down to as being the top ones for me. Thanks everyone who shared there. That's really, really great to see. So we're going to come back to values here in a moment, but what I want to just reiterate is that values are a tool, and they're a tool that we can use to shape really positive, supportive, safe cultures. But it's very hard to use those effectively as a tool in a team setting if we're not actually first aware of our own values. So as a final point on values, it's often useful to think of them as a sort of personal compass in terms of something that actually helps us find our way. And so personally, we may have a goal or an objective that we're working towards, but we don't necessarily know the whole journey or every step of the journey that's going to take us there. But if we know our values and we ask ourselves each step of the way, okay, what's the choice or the direction that I can move in here that stays in alignment with my values, with what's important to me, then we can be sure that we're moving in the right direction, even if we're not exactly sure what each step looks like. And that same concept then applies to a group or a team. The value becomes a sort of a directional tool that helps us guide our choices and our behaviors and get everybody sort of aligning with what we feel is truly important. Okay, so let's move on here and look at some action steps that we can all take towards really starting to do some important things that will have an impact on ourselves and also our environments and help create that safety and reduce the experience of bullying. So I spoke earlier about this idea of, can we put on our own oxygen mask before trying to help others? Is there anything that we can do to help ourselves feel secure in our own sense of self-worth? Can we own our sense of being good enough? And this is something that is actually incredibly important, because ultimately we cannot control other people's choices and behaviors and reactions. And as we go through life, we will come up against many difficult people, many difficult situations, whether it's bullying or other challenges that are brought to us by our sport or by our life. And so establishing an internal sense of being good enough, of establishing your own self-worth, is a mental skill that will stand us in really good stead through many, many different forms of challenges, and bullying is absolutely one of them. So the question here is, how do we know that we are good enough? How do we know that we are worthy as humans? If we don't spend much time thinking about this, what we do by default is we allow our environment, or the feedback that we get from our environment, to determine that for us. So in other words, I might say, okay, well, I know I'm a good rider if my coach is telling me I'm doing a good job, if all my peers around me are telling me that everything looks great and I look good, and maybe that I'm also doing well in competition. So if I'm using all of those as measurements of like, okay, I know I'm good enough, I know I'm a good rider because of all of that, the problem is that if any of those factors in the environment change, if my coach is no longer giving me positive feedback, or instead of reinforcement from my peers, I'm getting bullying comments from my peers, or I'm not doing well in competition, all of a sudden we lose our sense of confidence, we lose our sense of self-worth. And so we get this experience of being kind of at the mercy of the people around us and the feedback they give us, or the situations or circumstances that we're in. And we don't want that. We want to be able to have a strong sense of owning and controlling our own confidence. So in order to kind of get to the heart of this, we're going to come back to our mentee. And I want everyone to think about, what is the story that is making you feel, or might make you feel like you're not good enough? So when I say story, I mean, when you kind of think about what's the story that either you're telling yourself, because sometimes we tell ourselves stories, right, about why we're not good enough, or what's the story that maybe you've heard from other people that's made you feel like you're not measuring up, or you're not worthy, or you're not good enough. Sometimes these stories, when we tell them to ourselves, they're about not being that I can't fail, and I've failed before, and so my failures mean that I'm not good enough. Sometimes these stories are around people not approving of us, or people whose opinion we really, really, really value, feeling like we don't have their approval, and therefore we don't feel good enough. Yeah, interesting. So slow progress. I'm not progressing fast enough. And I have to say that's something I hear a lot, particularly in my work with equestrians. I think it's interesting. We're very hard on ourselves because we often have a perceived expectation about how fast we should be progressing. And if we're not meeting that expectation, then yeah, we feel like we're not measuring up. Body image. Yeah. So how we actually feel about what we see in terms of our body when we look in the mirror, or the type of feedback that we're getting from other people potentially about our physical appearance, that can be a hugely influential story. Absolutely. Thanks for the shares there. I'll leave it up here for another minute or so to see if anybody wants to add anything to that. People we value, gossiping about our skills being substandard. Yeah, so having someone who, yeah, absolutely, we have a lot of respect for, who we care about, feeling that they're telling a story about us that doesn't feel true or doesn't feel fair. When we're overhorsed, yeah, we can't manage the horse that we have. We're not good enough to ride the horse that we have. What about the one, I hear this all the time, my horse deserves a better rider than me. Being told people are better than you. Yeah, so really critical feedback. Okay, so again, thank you everyone. Oh, one more here. Devaluation of personal goals by those I look up to in my role models. Yeah, so a few themes there, right? Of having the people around us not validate our experience, or not validate what's important to us, can be really, really demoralizing. Absolutely. Seeing someone else advancing quicker than you. Yeah. And that again sort of triggers our expectations that we have around what is the appropriate rate to be progressing at, and how quickly I should be progressing. I think that this particularly impacts us in equestrian sport because we have this influencing factor of the horse that influences our progress. So it's not just us progressing, it's our horse progressing. And that can be a bit of a wild card sometimes, right? Unlike other sports where it's just us that we have to worry about progressing. Fabulous. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for sharing these stories. I know it can be really vulnerable to share even in an anonymous way. So thank you for doing that. So these are all examples of stories that where we're allowing something outside of ourselves to determine whether or not we feel good enough. And so this is really, really common. And what we want to start doing for ourselves is we want to start rewriting these stories. So the first step is to recognize that even though these are things that feel true and feel difficult, that if we allow ourselves to believe that those things get to determine our worth, then it's become a limiting belief. It's become something that's holding us back. And so we all always have the option to rewrite these stories. First step is we have to be willing to ask ourselves, is that story true? Is it fully true that somebody else devaluing my opinions, for example, means that I'm not good enough? And I'm not saying that experience isn't difficult, because 100% it is. What we want to get at is the truth of, does that experience actually mean that I'm not good enough as a person or a rider? And when we start to look at it that way, we can see that that's not true. And we want to be able to rewrite these stories in a way that puts us in control, that empowers us. So some examples of this would be to say, actually, I'm not defined by my mistakes. They help me grow. So it doesn't matter how other people react to my mistakes, or if I make mistakes, they're actually an important part of my growth. I determine whether or not I'm a good rider, no one else. And what I like to advise my athletes is to remember that good enough is all about the effort that you're putting in and the commitment that you have to the process. So I know I'm a good rider because I show up every day and I do my best for myself and my horse. And I manage my mistakes well. And I do my best to have a little bit of fun while I'm out there. And so all of those things are things that I can own. I determine what it means to be good enough. And again, we want to ground that in things that I have control over. So I know I'm good enough if I'm showing up and being kind to other people. I know I'm being good enough if I'm challenging my own assumptions and biases around bullying, for example, or around other people's experiences. Making sure that everything that we use as a measurement of whether or not we're good enough is something that we have control over. Might say that actually I dare to fail because it's a natural part of success. I'm not going to allow failure to be something that makes me feel vulnerable. I'm not going to allow other people's opinions of my failures to take away from the fact that I know that I have to fail as a part of growing and succeeding. And finally, then, that I'm going to choose to build my self-worth around things that I control. So the more that we can challenge these stories for ourselves, the more that we start to take ownership over establishing our own strong sense of self-worth. And from a place of feeling more in control of our own self-worth, we're much stronger in the face of bullying, and we're actually in a much better position to then help others. So this is really, really important. So when we're actually witnessing bullying, then what are some of the ways that we can respond? So there's a few kind of pros and cons to everything that we can see here. So it is possible to intervene on behalf of the person being bullied while it's actually happening, so in the moment. So the advantages of that are that it actually does it stops the bullying probably in that moment. It can send a strong, clear message to the bully that that's not acceptable. But it's not always an easy thing to do, right? Depending on the context, depending on the position that you have in that situation, requires a fair bit of bravery and courage sometimes to step up and do that. You could be in a situation where you're worried about being outnumbered. You might be worried, fearful of the bully yourself. And so there are some challenges to that. We can come back then and support the person after the fact. So maybe not intervene in the moment, but come and find them after and support them. So the advantages of that are that we help that person feel safer and less isolated. We share their experience. We can check in with them in terms of how they want it to be dealt with moving forward. It's kind of less risky. But the disadvantages are that it potentially allows the bully to get away with their act, setting the tone for the culture that we want to create and the behaviors that we want to uphold as a group. We can then potentially tell someone in authority if we're not in a position of authority ourselves. The advantages of that are that it's brought to kind of a higher level. There's an opportunity to investigate what's happened. It's a much lower risk to the person who's trying to get involved and help. And there can be actions taken from that really kind of cut off that bullying for good and work to shift the culture. There's not as many disadvantages or clear disadvantages here. Potentially, you may feel that you haven't sort of confronted the bully directly, and so you may feel that there's sort of unresolved issues maybe between yourself and the bully, or that there's still a need to communicate or clear something or clear the air if you've kind of gone around them to someone else. We can challenge the bully later, so go and speak to them and sort of share our thoughts after. And so advantages of that is that it's again, this gives a strong, clear, direct message to the bully. But the disadvantages again are that this can be challenging. And again, depending on the context we're in, there's a fair bit of bravery and courage sometimes needed. If it's not handled the right way, it could potentially make the situation worse. And so again, advantages and disadvantages. And then what about if the bullying is happening online, right? So we're less likely to witness online bullying as it's happening. So we're more likely to be responding sort of secondhand. And so what's really important here about online bullying is that if you're experiencing it, to reach out for help right away, to not suffer alone. To take action around just closing off communication with people as much as you can who are being bullied, who are bullying you, and to be mindful of your social environment in terms of who you're interacting with online, and not be afraid to sort of send a clear, firm message to someone that they're making you uncomfortable, and to close off that communication. If we witness someone being bullied online, then really what we want to do is support them to feel safe. And so we want to reach out to them and try to support them in any way that you can in terms of connection or discussion. A few things to keep in mind here, right? If we're intervening in bullying, it's really important to manage our own emotions, because remember, we're dealing with fragile emotions here. Both the bully's probably in a fragile emotional state of their own, as well as the victim. So it's important to be calm first, always calm, to try and stay as polite as possible, and just to be very firm in your language and in your convictions and what you're sharing. And I think it's a really good policy to just always stop and think before either you speak to what's happening, do you respond to the situation, or if it's online, before you click send, maybe before you send that email or that text in response to whatever's happened. So just as we draw to a close here, sort of the next few minutes, I want to talk about how we can intentionally bring this conversation about values and culture into our own communities as a way of establishing a really clear, powerful framework that does not open up any space for bullying. So what I would love to invite everyone to do as an action step after this webinar is to go back to your own individual teams and communities and open up this conversation and say, right, what do we want our team values to be? Can we choose a set of 4 to 5 team values that really resonate with everyone, that speak to what it is that we're here, like what it is that we stand for, what it is that we're all coming together to achieve, and what we want the ground rules around that to be. So for example, we might choose a list that has things like kindness, respect, or support, things like performance could be a value. We're all moving towards performance together and individually. But taking the time to have that conversation with the group can be a really powerful kind of group bonding experience, and it gets everybody on board because it then opens up the opportunity to really clarify, okay, so not only are we saying what values are important to us, we're also going to say what actions or behaviors support those values. So it's a really fabulous context to have a conversation about what are appropriate behaviors and what are inappropriate behaviors in the way that we interact with each other, the way we show up for each other, the way that we show up for ourselves. All of it is just a fabulous framework to clear the air and have those really fabulous open conversations about what works and what doesn't. So have a quick think, yourselves about what are, if you were to, go back to your communities and propose a set of values as a starting point for that conversation, what might you propose? What values come to mind for you when you think about a culture that supports safety, that supports growth, and supports that feeling of security for everyone? Just have a think about that. Feel free to share in the comments, or at the very least, just take note for yourself. And this is a question that might be worth coming back to. I'll be sharing the slides of this presentation too. And so if you want to go back and look at that values slide with all of them, that'll be there. Also, if you just Google a list of values, you'll come, many pictures will show up. And so that can be a good source of inspiration as well. So really what this comes down to is there's sort of 3 steps that we can take. We need to help ourselves feel safe. I really feel that we all have a personal responsibility to ourselves to learn the mental skills to help ourselves feel safe and confident within ourselves, to make sure that we're telling ourselves stories that support our confidence, that we're choosing stories and beliefs that support us. And that we're also kind of strengthening our own sense of what's true so that we're less vulnerable to the opinions and the emotions and the reactions of others. Then we also have a responsibility to help other people feel safe. And so we need to make sure that we're not making assumptions about what bullying is or isn't, that we are always opening conversation, instead asking, and really listening and validating other people's experience. There's a few people shared here today about how damaging and how frustrating that is, right? When someone doesn't validate your goals or your experience or what you're saying. And so sometimes the biggest gift we can give to someone who's being bullied is to really listen to their experience and really validate what's happening and just commit to supporting them in whatever way that you can. And then lastly, we want to make sure that we're all contributing to the shape of our own cultures that we're in. And we all exist in little subcultures, right, within our own barns and communities and sport communities. And all of us have a role to play in shaping and directing what those cultures look like. And so again, the values tool is a fabulous one to help start being more intentional about those cultures and really bring everyone together in setting the sort of rules and codes of behavior that then support us moving forward. So we're running a little over time here, so I won't do this on the Menti, but I just want to ask everyone to think about this for a moment. So based off of what we've talked about here today, what might be your personal action plan? We've discussed different ways. There's pros and cons to all the different ways that we can address bullying. So what resonated with you? What would you feel comfortable doing? What do you feel might be the most effective approach? So just take note of that yourself and maybe jot that down, and I'll come back to that in a moment. So ultimately what happens then when we're able to successfully create a bullying-free environment, what we're doing is creating a safe and secure platform or space for all of us to come together, to learn about ourselves, to show up as ourselves without fear of being ridiculed for that. And all of that is what supports us to really grow through the experience of equestrian sport and to give us the best shot at reaching our goals. So first and foremost, we're creating safety. We're creating safety for ourselves, and safety is a hugely important element of psychological safety is where we feel safe in ourselves and safe to be there. is a huge part of performance. And so what happens then is that with that psychological safety, we are able to set bigger goals for ourselves. And that's what we see in the research, that the more safe and secure someone feels in their environment, the more they're willing to push themselves, the bigger goals they're able to set. We also then are able to really maximize the benefits of our community. And, it's really important, I think, in equestrian sport, because it's not typically a team sport, although sometimes we come together on teams, then that, we really work to build the connections and emphasize the fact that we are a group, we are a team, even though oftentimes many of us then go away and compete individually. The environment of that team, though, is still essential and still has a huge impact on our individual success. And in some cases, of course, in some versions of equestrian sport, it is a team situation, and that team is working together for success. And so creating this safety in our environment allows us to really maximize the benefit of those connections and really build cohesive teams that are all clearly working towards one thing and have a clear sense of the values that are going to get them there. And so lastly, then, all of this enables us to be so much more successful. And I say successful in terms of meeting our goals, our performance goals, but also successful in terms of establishing a strong sense of who we are, of building confidence, in enjoying the experience of challenging ourselves through sport, and all the wonderful things that can come along with that. So with all of that in mind, I'd love to hear from all of you in the chat. What is your biggest takeaway from all of that? There's a fair bit of information there. Thank you, everyone, for the thoughts that you shared as we went along. And I'd love you to take it one step further and think, okay, what does that insight mean in terms of action? So what is that one piece or a couple of pieces that really resonated with you? How might that inform me to do something a little bit differently? Maybe do something a little bit more next time I'm in my environment, my barn environment, maybe do something a little less, or just change up the way that we either think about ourselves or other people. So with that question there, I'll just pull down the slides so that we can I'm just noting from Carolyn, so just might not have been clear there, Carolyn. I chose not to open that next Menti just because we were running really short on time. So if you just take note of it yourself, that would be fabulous in terms of an action plan. And I was just going to say that if anybody wants to share that plan or share the steps that they have in mind or things that they'd like to take action on in the chat now, it would be really great to hear. And just in relation to either your action plan or what sort of that top takeaway was for you today in terms of what's inspiring you to take action, do something a little bit differently, do something more, or do something less. And if anyone feels like coming off mute and actually just sharing their thoughts or speaking out to the group or asking some questions, then that would be fab as well. I may ask my students to share with my group any bully actions they've experienced to allow them to have a voice and validate their experience. Yeah, I think that could be really interesting. I would encourage maybe to start out doing that in a way that allows people to remain anonymous, could encourage more safety and security around that sharing. But again, you'll know best, you'll know the level of trust and security that's there in that group. But yeah, it could be something to consider. Is there a way to allow them to do that in an anonymous way? But yeah, I think that's a really, really great idea. Again, it's all about opening that conversation, leading by example and saying, look, this is a safe space where we can talk and share about what our experience is. Thanks so much for that, Carolyn. What's everyone else thinking?
I'm thinking that we can have a little chat with the coaches. So when they get introduced to their teams, we can encourage them to do the same things. So that's something I'll warn you guys about.
And what specifically do you think would you like to see those coaches doing?
Well, first, making sure that the kids feel safe being with them, because they will be doing the chaperoning and things like that. That's super important. and let them know there's zero tolerance for any, thing that is bullying or anti-team. And just making sure that when the kids are with their coaches and with their teams, that they feel they're always in a positive environment, because there's going to be winners, there's going to be losers. And, just so the coaches can hold their hands and make them feel happy about everything. So the games experience is a positive one, regardless of the outcome.
Yeah. One model that's really great, and I'm happy to share it with you, Wendy, too, in a written form, is to have the coaches speak through the fact that there's many ways to win. So it's not, so we can win at the games, even if we don't necessarily win in terms of placing. So the conversation would look like this: what does it look like to show up to the games and win as an individual? So what does it mean for me to win individually? What does it mean for us to win as a group? And to recognize that both of those things are not the same as having the score win. So if the score wins, we place, but what are the other ways that we can show up and win as a team? So is it about supporting each other? Is it about, holding on to that sense of self-confidence? Is it about, caring for my horse? There's so many different things that can go into that kind of winning experience.
Yeah, so that's something that we'll be working a little bit more as we get closer to the games, that sort of thing, when we have coach meetings, to just talk about what we can do.
Yeah, that sounds really great. Personally, my own waivers are a contract dealing with security, both physically and mentally. We both sign and keep a copy. That safety is discussed before they become a part of our team. Okay, very cool. Is there anything, so I think that's fabulous that it's there in a contract. And I would just say it might be interesting to think about, is there anything, or what's happening to then reinforce that messaging as the person moves through their experience? Is there any visuals up in the barn that kind of reinforce that messaging? Are there continued conversations that reinforce that? And I say that because our experience of the environment that we're in, although that sort of initial contracting sets the tone in a really fabulous way, we see that we really need to have the messages, the values, this is how we conduct ourselves, this is who we are, those messages really reinforced almost on a daily basis. And that's what's really fascinating about what we see in high performing teams, is that those teams have a really strong sense of the values and what's okay and what's not okay, and that's reinforced regularly. So maybe just some food for thought there. Anyone else willing to share some thoughts, either some insights and something they found interesting, something they want to take action around, or a sense of maybe a plan of how maybe they might like to try and respond to a bullying situation if they find themselves in it in the future?
It's very quiet.
It's very quiet.
Everybody's
away. I'm going to challenge everyone to put something in the chat, and I'm doing that because it'll help you remember. So when we attend these things, it's really easy to kind of absorb a bunch of information, and then it all just kind of washes out of our brain, and if we don't make it tangible. And so I'm going to challenge everyone to just try and share one tangible thing for the benefit of you, helping you remember and helping you kind of feel clear about what you want to take forward, so that this actually becomes something of use and not just, just an interesting hour that we spent thinking about it. Thanks, Nicole. Yeah, just overall being aware that previous situations that we've been in when being bullied can dictate personal biases. Yeah, that can create more sensitive environments in the future. And taking more time to think and reflect before acting is always a benefit to a situation. Yeah, absolutely. And it's something, we've all heard that a million times, I think and reflect, but it's interesting to think about, am I actually doing that? Because when we're in those triggered situations, when we're feeling fearful, either for ourselves or behalf on someone else, our tendency is actually to kind of jump in and not think. And that's again because of what the fear is doing to our brain, cutting us off from those kind of more rational, calmer parts of our brain. So thanks, Nicole. Yeah, some really great thoughts there. Anyone else? Anyone else willing to rise to the challenge and throw in an insight or an action step? Is Stephen, are you there? Do you have anything you might want to share, or Vanessa or Linda?
I am not really a coach. I'm here just to understand the bullying aspects. It intrigues me because I don't see it, or I have blinders on that I'm not aware of what's going on. I understand that it happens. I don't bully my horse. We get to go along quite well. So, and I learned from people that are, I feel, are role models that work with other people, and I admire that. And so I tend to emulate what they do, and hopefully there's no bullying in part of it. My curiosity to this is how do I become aware of it, and how do I don't want to say control the situation, but how do I deal with the situation? Do I bring in another coach? I would think, because most of these riders are going to be females. I'm a male. I've worked with the RCMP in the past, and that's not a good situation to be one-on-one with a female. So I would have to bring another person in to that conversation and just discuss it with somebody else so that we have the same frame of mind. That's basically my point of view on bullying. Just stop it. And how do you stop it? Be aware of it and to jump in and try to diffuse the situation. Because like you say, bullies are coming from insecurity. They don't know what they're doing. They've come from experience as well. They've been bullied. Just like situations where people are working from no knowledge. They work from something that they think is right, but in reality it's not. So what do I do?
Yeah. I think that's a really strong strategy there, Stephen, in terms of bringing more people into the conversation. Never hurts. Gender aside, I think having more people there is always a positive thing. And yeah, I think it's interesting that you say, how do I become more aware of bullying if it's not something I'm super aware of already? And so again, I would always come back to trying to really genuinely ask people about their experience. And so it may not be as direct as, hey, like, are you being bullied, or are you do you think you're experiencing bullying? We could start with just genuinely asking people, how are you doing today, and what's feeling difficult about this right now? What's feeling challenging? Are you feeling supported by your team? If not, okay, what's happening? What have you been experiencing? So just showing up with a real genuine interest in that person and their experience in a really kind of open-hearted and positive way is just a fabulous place to start in terms of opening up that conversation, which I think can help develop awareness of the other person's experience or what's happening, which then helps us sort of fine-tune our awareness to picking up maybe sometimes those more subtle dynamics that maybe we weren't aware of before. So that's where I would start. Let me know, does that feel helpful? What do you think?
Everything is helpful. The way you explain it, yes, I agree. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, no, for sure. I just want to make sure that was making sense. So brilliant. Okay, yeah, and thanks for sharing that. Because it's lots of really great stuff there. Thank you. All right. Anyone else willing to jump in and just share some thoughts? Gina or Vanessa or Linda. We have a Galaxy S10, whoever that is. Oh, I'm seeing here, I've got some new messages. Fabulous. Thanks, Carolyn. So in relation to competition, we sit at the end of each day as a group, we review everyone's tests, read through, discuss each person's ride, allow each one as an individual time to shine. Oh, fabulous. Sometimes bullying could be unintentionally done by a judge. Yep. Discuss how everyone feels, learn how as a group to build strength from things that may make us feel less than great. Fabulous. I think those are all really, really great steps. You're, as you said, you're giving time for individuals to build and recognize their strengths, but you're also establishing group community there and helping everyone participate in the process of lifting everyone up together. So it's like we all lift each other up and we all move forward as a team. So yeah, that sounds really, really positive. Love it. Fabulous. Well, I won't keep torturing people for questions or comments if it feels like we've kind of we've covered everything, or if there aren't any sort of lingering questions on that. So I suppose I'll just finish by saying thank you for hanging out with me for an hour and paying attention. And this is one of those topics that, you know, as Wendy said, is incredibly important, and it's worth coming back to again and again and really challenging ourselves. You know, what else can we learn here? What else can we? How can we be more curious, more invested in understanding both our own experience and other people's experiences? And how can we just keep working towards building those strong, clear communities with strong, clear values that help us navigate, you know, the challenges that can lead to bullying. So with that, I'll wrap up there. And yeah, just thank you so much, everyone. It's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you, Annika. I did not realize you're in Ireland and that it's probably close to 2:30 in the morning for you. So I am so
It is indeed. No, it's just very, yeah.
No, we'll talk about having the other webinars topics that we had discussed, and we'll time them a little better than, you know, 2 in the morning for you, which I'm sorry, that wasn't fair.
No, don't worry at all. I sometimes do. It's one of the things about working in 2 time zones. Sometimes you just have to work at really bizarre hours. It doesn't happen that often. So no, it's my pleasure to hang out with you all in the middle of the night here. Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, thanks for agreeing to do this. I think everyone's going to leave with something important. Mm-hmm. And then we will again have one. We'll try and do one a month. Okay. I'll go offline with you tomorrow and we can discuss that. But okay, thank you to everybody for participating. I really appreciate it. We're getting closer to the games. I know right now there's not a lot that the head coaches are being able to do, but the principles of today's webinar are important that you can take forward to your teams. And as we get closer to the games, I will be in more contact with you with more information, introduce you to your teams, talk about what you have to do, and we'll go. But right now, I know I haven't been in touch a lot, but right now it's a very quiet time. Before soon, we'll be throwing tons of stuff at you. So I'm glad you were able to make it. I'm glad Annika got up in the middle of the night to talk to us. And I will be letting the winners of the t-shirts know tomorrow, and we'll go from there. So thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you, Wendy.
All
Have
right.
a great day, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.